called January Song 2021. Part 1. A single quarter falls out of my jeans as I pull them off. The usual Washington on one side, John Brown's Harper's Ferry Fort on the other. Once I'm settled, I put it in a safe place as a token of what was once possible and now is just small money. 2. Chad proudly notes that he dates women of other races, but secretly admits to himself that it's mostly a forensic countermeasure. 3. Can you see how anonymous the streets are now that they're covered in tossed aside masks? 4. When the counting is done, cases, masks, votes, the dead shall surely come back and shake us by the lapels, saying, "Pay attention, pay us mind." It didn't feel like anything really after a while, and that's hard to understand. Some seem more upset than others, certainly, but in the last analysis, all clear emotion is the privilege of the involved, and I somehow am no longer that. You reach a point when the world has become overwhelming. I think that you reach a point of numbness. And this is kind of what I was feeling just recently, is that just prior to the inauguration, prior to everything, prior even to the assault on the Capitol, I had reached this point where it was like just so overwhelming. I wasn't feeling really much anymore. So that was what that was about. This is from the early days of the pandemic. The Foragers. Outside the Dollar Tree on Providence Road, which is strangely closed at 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon. No sign, no explanation. Several of us standing widely spaced before it, having heard a rumor of a delivery of needed things. I'm getting a hunch I'm afraid to share. A newish SUV shows up and a guy leans out of the passenger window. Is it closed? We heard it was closed for 2 weeks. Someone on the staff tested positive. Shit. We heard there's a delivery at Walmart. They're staggering the times they put stuff out. We scatter slowly, as civilized people do. Each of us walking to our cars as wary of the others as if we were all carrying spears. I don't know if you remember, but I do, depending on where you were, that period of time when the stores started getting really weirdly sparsely done. And yeah, we know about toilet paper and meat supplies and hand sanitizer, but weird stuff, cup of soup, disappeared. I do an awful lot of caretaking for my parents who are very old, and my mom loves having cup of soup around. I couldn't find it anywhere. I can remember going to 4 and 5 stores looking for cup of soup, and they never had it. Matter of fact, I found 4 packages today and bought it and brought it to her, and it had this sort of like real feel about foraging and scavenging in the desolate landscape, and it was a weird feeling. So I mean, it immediately brought back this sort of primitive instinct sort of thing type stuff that came out as a result of that. Peanut butter, yeah, pasta shells, yeah, they'd be wiped out, and they'd be like 1 package of gluten-free rice-based spinach flavored pasta, and you didn't want it, you know. That's how it worked. So how's this going? We're getting deeper now. It's going to get darker. So I just want you to know that that's where we're headed next, because it's going to get worse. So before it gets better. So off we go. I wrote a chapbook, an e-book a while back. I have a Patreon, and I do exclusive ebooks for various people. And I did this ebook of poems about classic American symbolism and mythology and icons, and what we mean when we talk about them. And The Wizard of Oz appeared a couple of times in the ebook, as being one of those icons that everybody talks about. And I dedicate this to the QAnon believers of the world. This is called The Flying Monkeys. The Flying Monkeys flew in from Oz to suburbia and landed just in time for Sunday dinner. Sat there on the neat margins between the sidewalks and the curbs, crouching on the fresh cut grass, shitting on the blade-savaged dandelions. Did you know that there's a word for the strip of green in between? It's called the verge. The Flying Monkeys were on the verge. That Sunday, jackets, hats, attitudes intact, acting exactly as we'd expect, tails tucked, wings folded, waiting for orders. Down the block from here, someone cracked a screen door and said, "You look hungry. Why don't you come in for a bite?" to the ones perched outside their house. And one by one, the monkeys filed inside. The neighborhood was dead quiet. What was going on in there? The monkeys came out hours later, dressed in the clothes of the folks who had invited them in, who then followed the monkeys naked into the streets, who stood passive as they were taken and lifted and carried higher and higher, seeming to rise almost forever until they vanished. Then some among us rushed to proclaim this the rapture at last, while others simply laughed and clapped their hands along with the suddenly welcome flying monkeys and their magical flight plans. And more stripped and flew, and the monkeys took over their empty homes and their jobs, their routines. They folded up their wings tight under t-shirts and mowed the lawns and even the verges. Sat out sunning themselves in their yards and swimsuits, their tails slung lazily to one side of the lounge chairs or the other. That's how it's been for a while now. Now and then a distant scream. Now and then decomp on the wind, as if somewhere there's a huge and growing pile of broken bodies in a valley just beyond the verge of sight. Those of us left aren't saying much. There are a lot of monkeys around, and frankly, we can't tell the difference anymore. Not sure who's giving the orders about who flies and who gets flown, who rises and who falls. We fret, we fear, we whisper to each other the old line, "These things must be done delicately." Even though it's clear that for the monkeys, that's no longer true. No, they most certainly do not. When I wrote that was pre-pandemic. And when I wrote that, I had to go back and I had to do the old, did the flying monkeys have tails? I couldn't remember if the flying monkeys in Oz had tails or not. I wanted them to have tails for the poem, but I couldn't give them tails if they didn't have tails. So just in case anybody ever asks and you don't remember this poem, they have tails. So, all right. So, Hannah, you got something? Yes? No? I just saw you smiling there. So.
As the expert here, they definitely have tails in the movie.
They're thick and curly, as a matter of fact. I went and looked. All right, moving on. So one of the things that is also true and it would be difference. It would be different. Um, for me is that I'm navigating this pandemic. So a little bit about me and my background. Uh, when I'm not doing this, I am self-employed as a training and development consultant. I run and develop training programs for companies. I'm an independent contractor working with a lot of people. And my business nosedived at the beginning of the pandemic until everybody said, oh, wait, we can do this virtually. So I live on Zoom. I was on Zoom all day running classes and stuff. So I live on Zoom. And I'm not going anywhere. And my partner, my girlfriend is out of work right now as well. So as time has gone on, this sort of really insular feeling has really sort of like had its effect on mental health. I have bipolar disorder, bipolar 2, and it has been a struggle at times to really survive. So the next couple of pieces are pretty dark. Song of My True Self. Just as I was the stupid child, wearing slippers out into the snow. Just as I was the lying child, hiding report cards and failure notices. Just as I was the teenage fake sensitive, wanting only to jump someone's bones. Just as I was the heedless young drunk, waving a knife at the hometown bar. Just as I was the swollen ego, chasing grandeur with a pen on a stage. Just as I was the frightened adult, scrambling, mystified by the future. Just as I am now. What am I now with so little grip on possibility? So much weight dragging behind. I lean, I loaf. I invite old words to explain just who I was, who I am. They're never enough. Just as I am now is how I always have been. Cold feet, lies, weapons, drunkenness, inexplicable pools of lust. Ego overriding fear. A citizen of this place and time, as I always have been. Like my country, I am stopped, waiting. And now another piece of the mental health issue. I'll talk about it after the poem. This is called a blasphemy. You need to understand that I was what they wanted all along. The mistake beyond any blood quantum. The denatured native boy turned white man, but not quite. Something nothing at all, because to admit my own split is all in my head, is to admit my inherent lack of substance. I detest myself. It's the proof of their success, more than all the forced sterilizations, more than all the direct massacres and stolen bones, more than even the mascots and the plastic feathers on the sports fans. I am what they wanted all along, something less than real and more than myth. It's a Friday night and I'm a touch more than fucked up about it. A weekend ahead of being a ghost of my expected iteration, and then the week, and then another weekend, and somewhere in that sequence, I will eventually pass, and the nation is smoldering, as it would with or without me, although some would say it's because of me and how I was made. That's part of the reason that the country ended up here. I'm the token, slipped into the great genocide game to get the balls rolling. God, if you exist, this isn't your whole fault. It's also mine. I failed to die soon enough to make them regret me. They call me a dirty word that isn't even obscene enough to mask my own name, which is beyond dirty. A blasphemy of how I was supposed to be called forth. I so if it wasn't clear from that, one of the things that I deal with as well, dichotomy is kind of important, an important theme in my life. Bipolar disorder. I am biracial. My father is Mescalero Apache from New Mexico, uh, born on the reservation but sent to a residential school, um, which means that he ethnically native but not culturally connected at all. Doesn't have any connection back. I've been to the reservation, and it's like going to a foreign country. I don't have any connection to it myself. And there are times when, especially in these days of identity, and especially with the president we just had, who I would be more than willing to bet if you pointed at the ethnic groups he disliked the most, we natives would have been on the top of that list, because he thought of them as competitors to his casino business, and testified in Congress about, well, they don't look like Indians to me, a long time ago. It has been a very heavy time period to be sort of like dealing with this sort of set of identity issues and stuff. So put that together with the bipolar disorder, and it's been fun. So trending upwards. Here we go. For the fool on the tarot card with his dog and his bag. When you go out on the road for the first time, whatever distance seems too far for you to travel on one road without turning is precisely how long you will have to travel before you can rest. Even if you turn from the path upon setting foot upon it, you will end up having gone as far as if you'd never changed your mind, not even once. You'll be weary, and all at once the enormity of the journey will feel mountainous upon you. A rear view of peaks climbed, avalanches, near falls, exhaustions, exaltations. Think for a moment, though, of the billions throughout time who grew up simpler, constrained but happy, who took the straight paths allowed them: serf, cannon fodder, peasant, hunter, farmer, who ended up in the same place you are now, resting at the end of a road. Do you think they looked back any less amazed and overwhelmed than you? You were so sure of yourself once. You followed every crazy path you came on and congratulated yourself for unique spontaneity and great fortune. Look around. Are you alone? I think we have come to a realization that all of us travel. What's the line about be kind to everyone you meet because everyone's carrying a huge burden, a heavy burden? I think a lot of what has happened over the last year or so has made a lot of people realize that. There's a lot who don't, but I think a lot of people begin to realize that as a result of what we've all been through. This one goes out to anybody who lives where this season happens. It's called mud season. It hit us all in the middle of the second week of an undistinguished month. It was spring, mud season, not yet dry enough to make us feel comfortable that winter was over. Everything was average, and that was odd enough. We had thought it would be a mad season, and there would be chimeras alighting on all of our roofs after the insane weather and raging plagues we'd been through. It was nearly unbelievable that we could trust reality to do what it always did: keep boringly on track with equinoxes and seasonality. We kept waiting for golems to come knocking, and when they didn't, we started daring to hope mythology would stay put in our memories. Even though we saw people still dying, even though there were still insurgents surging and guns were everywhere, somehow the fact that we'd seen mud before, just like this, thick, laced with ice, concealing old snow under a jacket of filth, somehow the fact that it was mud season and it looked the same as always, made us feel plagues and idiots were finite and would pass as surely as this muck will eventually dry out and go green. We're a little ahead of mud season here in New England, but it's coming. It's coming. So, all right. Okay. A long one, and a weird one, and it's old. This dates back to early 2000s. It's been published in a couple of anthologies. And when people talk to me about this one, they always say, gee, where did you get this? And it's like, yeah, I'm not really sure. Sometimes they just sort of happen. It's called As Slow as Possible. September 5th, 2001. A group of musicians and philosophers begin to inflate the bellows of a church organ in Alberstadt, Germany, in preparation for a performance of John Cage's piece, As Slow as Possible. Hate's eyes pop open. He gets up, dresses, steps outside. Hate finds that while most people do not want to talk to him, there are still others who embrace him, taking him to mean something he never wanted to be. And all Hate can do is numbly submit, for no does not mean no when your name is Hate. Although he's dragged it with him for so many years, Hate does not understand his own baggage. He tries to pretend his name is meaningless. He tells himself it's simply a breath, pushed through a half smile, ending in a full stop behind his tongue. Every other thing it carries was added by others along the way. Hate thinks of himself as having had so much potential. It's all their fault for having robbed him. As Slow as Possible was originally written in 1944 at the end of World War II as a piano piece that would last a half hour or so based on the natural decay of notes being played. This organ arrangement virtually eliminates the possibility of decay and creates the space for a performance of an indefinitely long piece of music. Hate prefers silence. Assuming that to be a disability, everyone who meets him offers Hate a voice to speak through. When he does attempt to speak on his own behalf, Hate's throat cracks. The edge of his own meaning salts his tongue. Nothing green can grow there. The vision of those who now inflate the bellows is that this piece will be played beginning to end, and the distance between the beginning and end of this performance will be 639 years. The people who play this music will die before completing their service to the piece. The people who will complete the service are not yet born. In slack moments, Hate tells himself, if I were to change careers, I'd be a baker. All the loaves I baked would split open at the far end and grow larger as they were eaten. You'd never want for more. You'd never get to the end of a loaf. If I were to marry, I'd pick a partner named Bread Dancer. Bread Dancer and I were to have children. They'd be named Easter and Breakfast. Bread Dancer would dance the bread dance for each person who bought bread. And after many years, I would leave the business to my children and they would bake for others' children. And that's the way it would go for as far out as I can see. The church that holds the organ was purchased strictly to house this organ in this performance. It was unused for years and is now refurbished as a place for the longest music to stretch out. There are still pipes waiting to be installed. This organ cannot even yet play all the necessary notes to complete the piece. Hate finally moves from his home, burning it behind him, leaving in the dead hour before dawn, taking little with him, no ID, no passport. Hate becomes a monk on multiple roads, plays at pilgrim and tinker, but always ends up a soldier, always regrets, turns away, always, always, always. February 5th, 2003. The first chord of the piece is struck upon that organ. Lead weights hold the keys down, and the notes will sound for the next year and a half. Hate, after poisoning many years with his wandering, discovers the Halberstadt church and enters to pray for amnesia. Everything must be possible, even if it has not yet been imagined. Even Hate is tired of hate. Even Hate is tired of hate. In my world, anyway. Which leads us to the last poem, the final piece. I want to thank everybody for listening. I certainly want to take questions from people too, as well. As Ben mentioned earlier, I perform more regularly than not with a band. I play guitar and do vocals with the band, and I do my poetry with a background of three incredible jazz, funk, rock, you name it, musicians. Our bass player plays flamenco guitar, keyboards. He just bought a Chapman stick, so we're going to add that to the mix as soon as we get back out live. And we play live out fairly often. We're called Duende Project. We're on all your available streaming and download platforms if you want to go check us out. This is a piece that I typically perform with music, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it without tonight. And for those of you who have heard me read before or seen me read before, I apologize, because I swear I read 90% of my performances with this piece. So, and I thank you all. This piece is called DIY. She burns sage at the root of her favorite tree and calls herself priest while in town. They call her slut and worse because she dares to love who and what and where she wants. On the nights of the full moon, the men and the women of this town come out and they circle her stucco walls because there's something in there that they need. And out there in front of the white church, on the green lawn, right under the nose of the fat pastor, she dances without bending a blade of grass because God finds her agreeable. Over there in front of the frat house, two men kiss. And the dangerous drunken boys inside see it and decide to do nothing this time. That's a start. Two have begun to be comfortable making public their own sacrament of the infinite. And my grandmother sniffs, elderly is such a spindly word. The legs of that word do not begin to support me. She traded in her electric typewriter 2 years ago for a laptop and writes the definitive poetry of our time between the innings of Cubs games. And she will not stop smoking, ever. Swears that if she gets to heaven to find the clouds are posted, she'll find another place to light up. Friends, the arms of God are nearly endless, but there you hang out at the end of one of them like a finger on a vast hand, and all that's asked of you is that you touch the earth and transmit what you feel back to the heart. So make a living, make a life, make love, make art, adorn this world with the work of your soul, but do it yourself, because no one will do it for you. Thank you.